Hey friend, quick talk. So recently I had somebody come to me and they were very upset because they read a figure out of context on the internet, where of course everything is perfectly valid and reasonable and accurate at all times. And they asked me if it was true, and I had to tell them yes, but here's the context. And the figure that they were referring to is hearing that up to 80% of people who attempt to take their lives report saying that they directly told someone beforehand. Out of context, that can make us feel like we missed very obvious signs. The tyranny of hindsight, if we are now survivors who have lost somebody, comes in like a tsunami. And once we hear things like that, we often look back and say, yes, this was a sign. This was a sign. I should have seen this. I should have known that that's what the subtext of this meant. No, you weren't. The suicidal mind is very good at convincing its victim, and there's a reason why we call people who take their lives victims, because there isn't the same agency there as we would expect from somebody who isn't suffering this process. It's highly illogical. We like to think of ourselves as top of the food chain, very, very smart, very rational, very enlightened beings. We're not. The limbic system in your brain operates faster than your prefrontal cortex does. What that means is that we feel first, we have instinct first, and then we have to interpret that into conscious thoughts for our inner monologue. We are not coming from a place of rationality, and a suicidal mind that has already self-destructed, where something has gone wrong, and it is attempting to convince the conscious part of that person's mind, of their thoughts, to agree that that is a logical course of action, is very good at manipulating that brain into believing it. And one of the ways it goes about it is testing. It tests the people around it. It tests the environment around it. Sometimes this is for genuine fact-finding. The suicidal mind, for most people, tends to really like making lists of pros and cons. But it will come up with a reason why it's correct. And if you've ever had an argument with somebody who has to be contrary about absolutely anything, then you have some sort of idea what's going on up there in that process. So a person who is suicidal, who is intending to take their life, or at least on the precipice of getting to that point where it's passed from a passive suicidal ideation to an active suicidal ideation with an impending action, that person will do things like test the people around them, and that's where you'll hear phrases like, oh, haha, I don't need to worry about what's going on at work. It won't be my problem next week. Any of that sound familiar in hindsight? People who are suicidal, we hear this directly from them. We can attest to this from firsthand experience over all of the years we've been seeing this happen, that there are people who will say things like this, and that counts towards that 80% figure, that very scary 80% figure, where they think they're being blatant. They think it is a clear admission that there is a problem and that they need help. But what they're doing is engaging in a game that their subconscious has predetermined the outcome of, and it's rigged from the beginning. They're saying, hey, listen, here's a fair test. I'm going to drop hints. And if the people in my life don't read between the lines, and if they don't pick up on those hints, then clearly I'm not that important. Clearly I don't matter. Clearly whatever it is they're telling themselves, however their brain works. And everyone's process is different, but that's the game. And it's rigged from the start. I can't underscore that enough. You were never meant to win those contests. They are always meant to set up a scenario where the suicidal part of the brain can say, look, you dropped all these hints and no one picked up on it. That means I'm right. No one will miss you. And that is very hard to hear for us as survivors, to know that somebody we cared about may have been suffering through this. Again, not everybody. But it is important long-term to understand that whatever you can identify in hindsight now, knowing everything you know, does not mean you were supposed to pick up on it at the time. Once we know the ending to a story, it's very easy to look back over the rest of the mystery novel and see where the plot twist was coming from. But real life doesn't work that way. It's not a choose your own adventure. We can't go back and do anything about it, but we were never meant to know in the first place, because if we really were, they would tell us. And some of us have had that experience where we were told directly that this is what was happening. But for many people, it's not that direct. It's not that succinct. And the people who are suffering with suicidal ideation are already suffering a fault of logic. We cannot expect to have seen every single sign that may have been present, because you were never meant to. And I want to end this video with a note to the people who are suffering from suicidal ideation who might be listening in on this. You are not being as direct as you think you are. You are not running a proper test. The information you are getting back is being filtered, and it feels very logical because it's originating inside of you. That doesn't mean you thought of it independently, and that doesn't mean it's accurate test results. If you really want an accurate estimation, you will find that almost always people are willing to do far more than you give them credit for, but you have to give them the ability to do so, and you can't beat around the bush. Just say it. That's all for now, friends. See you next time.